Let me share my screen and let me welcome everybody. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Garden State Esports monthly webinar. My name is Chris Aviles. I am the president of Garden State Esports. If you're not familiar with Garden State Esports, as always, our mission is to use esports as a platform to help students grow in all different manners. And I'm really excited about tonight's webinar. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, SHI and Intel. Thanks to their generosity, Garden State Esports will be free for the foreseeable future. So we thank them for believing in our mission and making sure that all of the students we serve here in New Jersey are able to use esports, and all the opportunities that comes along with it. And speaking of opportunities, I'm super excited about tonight. We have Sergeant First Class William J. Boyle. He is the Garden State Esports military liaison. As I've talked about in previous webinars, one of the most valuable relationships we have in Garden State Esports is with the Army. And our partnership, which has been an academic partnership really around how can we take the Army's resiliency training, their leadership training, and how can we take the work and the effort and the energy that they've put into creating that and use it in our esports practices. Similarly, the work that the Army does around the Performance Triad, right, and how diet, sleep, and exercise affects a student's overall performance, not just in esports, but also in school, tapping into what they've learned in the Army about that, right? And again, applying it to our students. So Sergeant Boyle is here today to share with us really on a number of different fronts, what life is like in the military as somebody who is part of the Army esports team. And I'm super excited about that. For those of you who have seen these webinars before, we always kind of like talk about origin stories and how we kind of got to where we are today. And the origin story of kind of how I got here, and I guess in a way Garden State Esports exists, I owe to the Army. My father served in the Army and his occupational, his MOS was communications. And a lot of what he did was laying down phone lines and making sure the communications worked, for wherever he was currently stationed. And it was interesting. The other thing that was kind of neat too is my dad was a really talented soccer player. And so when he was stationed in Germany, he played for US Army Soccer. And, they would have these show matches all the time with just different German teams. And it's kind of neat to see how he, his occupation was communications when he was there, and that's what he did. But he also got to, play soccer as well for the Army. And it's, very similar to what we're seeing what's happening with esports in the Army. But when my father, left the Army, he got a job at AT&T, same thing, communications and laying phone line and stuff like that. And when I was about 4 or 5 years old, they asked him if he wanted to go back to school and learn how to fix and repair computers because they, had this opening. So I remember my dad, after leaving the Army, he went right into college. And what was kind of neat was the way that my father and I bonded, where we were building computers together. We would basically do his homework together on the weekends. And so I had been, I've been building computers since I was like 5 or 6 years old. And soon after we built them, we would load on the operating systems. And I remember my first game I ever played was Alley Cat Alley on DOS. And, the rest is history. I started gaming and building computers so young. And again, my father was a bit of a troublemaker and going into the Army where he got these skills that he could eventually use at AT&T, and AT&T investing in him and seeing, his potential, sending him to college. And, my father worked at AT&T for 25 years and eventually was in charge of, IT for the tri-state area for all the AT&T, installations. So it was pretty neat. And so, I think in a way, like I said, I have the Army to thank for that, keeping my dad on the straight and narrow and arming him with the skills he needed to be successful. So I'm excited to introduce Sergeant First Class William Boyle, somebody who I have been absolutely thrilled to get to know as he's been the point person for me as we take, like I said, the performance triad research and data that the military is doing, the resiliency training and the leadership training that the Army is doing, and we put that into our social emotional learning curriculum that we're using with students in and around esports practice. So first, Sergeant Boyle, thank you so much for joining us. And just, like I shared my origin story, I would love to know what led you to join the Army. And from there, how did esports come into the picture? I didn't really know, the Army had an esports team, and probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when I started making my own esports team, at the middle school level, doing that research and then finding out that the Army had an esports team, I thought that was fantastic. So, what led you to join? And then how and when did kind of esports come in the picture for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say, Chris, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure working with you and what you've been doing for, New Jersey, and with the leaps and bounds you've been with the esports and getting it down to the middle school and high school level. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I did join the high school or the Army right after high school. Again, I was in that generation where, I was really getting pushed to go to college, but ever since I think I was like in middle school, I kept telling my parents, like, I'm gonna join the Army, I'm gonna join the Army. And they kept brushing it off. And they're like, oh, go to college. So it wasn't for me. So I ended up joining the high school right after, or I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep saying that, joined the Army right after high school. And so I joined, I went to basic training at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. I did my job training at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. My MOS in the Army is field artillery. So I'm not necessarily the guy who, pulls the string on the howitzer. I'm more of the eyes. So I'm the guy who's finding and locating the targets and sending the data. So it does require a decent amount of math. You do have to be aware of your surroundings at all times, but I've really enjoyed my job. I enjoy what I do. I've had some really great memories with it. I spent my first 6 years in the Army at Fort Campbell in Kentucky with the 101st. I had 2 deployments to Afghanistan while I was down there. And now currently I'm working as a recruiter up in New Jersey. So my tenure as a recruiter is coming to an end. This end of the year, I should be done. Still don't know where I'm going next. Hopefully I'll find out soon. But it's been a journey. I've definitely met a lot of great people, and the experiences I've had here in New Jersey as a recruiter, especially in the esports, it's really kind of allowed me to take a step forward in, my passion, and actually kind of get to learn the business side of it. And it's definitely because it's becoming so popular and the career field's really, a lot of people are trying to get in. I'm super excited. And I really hope that, my next, life choice can be something in the esports realm. So.
Now, were you always a gamer? Did you always consider yourself a gamer even before service?
Yes, I was definitely that kid whose parents were always telling him to get off the video games. Ever since I was really little, I always had to have that balance of, school, sports, homework. But I was always, every chance I could get, I was hopping on the video games and trying to have fun. So.
And so you get into the Army, you go through basic, and at what point does esports kind of jump on your radar? When did you realize that was something that you could explore in the Army?
So believe it or not, it really wasn't until, I found out I was going to be a recruiter, because immediately my mindset kind of changed. Like, being as an artilleryman, my mindset was really focused on, like, hey, this is my mission. This is what I do. I've always played video games. I've loved video games. I've loved, the esports scene. But as far as, how could I use it as like a career, it never really occurred to me until I was in the Army recruiting college. And I was like, hey, how do we, target our demographic? How do we get, this upcoming generation to understand that, there's a human side to the Army? and I knew esports was on the rise. I love esports. A lot of my soldiers were gamers, and I was like, that's the answer right there. We just, need to get on the sticks with them and show them, that, we're just normal people. We just happen to wear a uniform. We're gamers just like them, and we love it just as much as they do. So
it's neat. Is one of the fun benefits of having partnered with the Army is I've gotten to join a few discords where I can see soldiers kind of self-organizing tournaments and some of that stuff. And so, I mean, I guess it should have occurred to me, but it didn't for some reason. Just how popular is esports and gaming and that kind of culture in the Army?
Surprisingly, it is extremely popular. You'd be surprised. Even every job you can think of, whether it's your infantryman or it's like your cybersecurity, there's gamers everywhere. I remember having, when I first got promoted to sergeant and I had my own team, I'd have to go and check on my soldiers, make sure they were okay, and every single one of them brought a gaming PC with them had it in their barracks room. And I didn't know whether to be like amazed or what, but I was like, oh, okay, you guys are all gamers too. And so for me, being that I've always played video games, it was super easy for me to connect to my soldiers, which as a leader is important. You need to be able to have that connection. So we actually, a large group of my soldiers, we kind of all got into Rocket League, and we actually had a team function where people brought consoles over to my house, and we brought TVs, and we had our own like internal platoon Rocket League tournament, and it was so much fun.
Call them LAN parties back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So take me to that next step. Is how does a soldier in the Army go from kind of that casual, hey, we're bringing our console over to Sergeant Boyle's house, to actually being part of the US Army Esports team? And what is your role with US Army Esports?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was fortunate enough that, I was able to get my foot in the door, like right at the kind of birth of US Army Esports.
And how long ago was that?
It was almost 3 years ago
3 years
now.
ago, okay.
Yeah. But they've made it so easy, honestly, because the thing is too, with like a lot of like big name organizations, like you have so many people that want to do it, the chances of them even acknowledging you or viewing you is very slim. But with the Army Esports, it's a community first, right? So you join their Discord, you get to know the people, you interact with them. Even if you're not in the Army, you can still join, you can talk to them, be like, hey, like, how do you like the Army? What's the Army like? And you can get that, personal dialogue. But all you have to do is find the community that you're interested in, whether you're a Counter-Strike player, Rocket League, Fortnite, Rainbow Six. We have every single title you can think of. Just get into that community, get involved, participate in conversations, and just start playing with them. A lot of these teams do like community nights where you can play the actual US Army Esport team for that title. They also have like academies where if you're interested, you can hop on there. They'll do like coaching, they'll do like scouting, all that kind of stuff. So it's super easy, super friendly. It kind of takes a lot of the stress out because, like I said, it's a community first, and then, the team kind of just falls into place from there.
And, you said that there's almost like, I guess, an official US Army Esports team. Do you know anything about, that tryout process? Because I'm curious, I wonder if there's a correlation between, for people like me and Eric and Regina and Nick who are here, who have our own esports teams. Obviously, there's varying degrees of talent, right? I have kids on my team that are fantastic, but then I also have kids on my team who maybe aren't, so good, but they love to be there. They're great teammates and stuff like that. What is the process, or what does it look like for those soldiers that maybe are talented? I know you mentioned off camera that you were a grand champ in Rocket League. How do you find those best of the best, and how do they get to be on the official US Army Esports team?
Yeah, good question. So the way the US Army Esports team is kind of broken up is it's kind of this spider web, if you will. So you have like your marketing team, which is the team that goes to all the different events. And then each title has like a manager, an assistant manager, like a coach.
Just like we do. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're interested, a lot of times the coaches are always posting tryouts like, hey, tryouts are this day for if you want to participate. If you can't make it, here's a makeup day. If you're kind of on the fence, if you want to do it or not, like you just participate in the community games. And if they see the skill and the potential that you have, they'll reach out to you right then and there and be like, hey man, have you ever considered, trying out for the team, or would you be interested in being a member of the team? But the biggest thing is just being in there with the community. They're always trying out new people because we're constantly getting new soldiers. We're constantly getting new interests. So a lot of the teams are not like locked in. Because there's always that new soldier that could join the Army tomorrow who could be, top 100 in the world. And then obviously, he's going to want to try out for that team. So it's very fluid. And being that, we are the Army, the mission does come first. So there may be instances where a player has a mission and can't compete. So that's where there is that fluidity with the teams where everybody's kind of able to backfill and work together.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, and what you're describing isn't dissimilar to what we're doing in Scholastic Esports. We have those leadership roles: president of the esports team, vice president, treasurer, and then something, Sergeant Boyle, because we kind of talk about this stuff all the time, is making sure kids know the different occupations, vocations that are part of that esports ecosystem, right? Because the reality is the chances of becoming a professional esports player is pretty, small. But when you talk about STEM careers, right, I always talk about how you have to be serious about esports because that's where so many of these STEM careers and, lucrative jobs of the future are going to be. So to hear that the Army has, esports kind of marketing division to their esports team, and, I'm sure other things like we do, like, video editing and all that good stuff. It seems to be following a similar format that we have in Scholastic Esports. That's kind of neat. But let's step back because, again, that partnership that Garden State Esports and the Army have, we've been learning so much about resiliency training and leadership, and we've been taking what we can learn from the Army and translating it into, okay, what does that look like in an esports practice? And I remember, his name escapes me, but I was talking to another soldier from the Army who was, he would lead leadership trainings. And, I said, okay, well, how do you teach leadership in the Army? And he was giving examples. And one of the things that stuck out to me is he talked about how you want to create adversity and give people the opportunity to work together to overcome that adversity. And he gave me a specific example where, they would do some leadership training around trying to achieve a mission. And, maybe the person in charge of that mission, for whatever reason, was incapacitated. And he talked a little bit about distributed leadership and who would have to step up. And, the SEL team and we kind of took that example and we kind of created an activity in practice where, somebody's communications, their comms would malfunction during a match. And, maybe you have that point person on your esports team who's usually the shot caller. Maybe he can't communicate anymore, right? He got disconnected or his comms went down, whatever the case may be. How do we prepare other people on the team to step up and fill that role in case something happens? So, talk to us a little bit about what it has looked like for you, the leadership training, the resiliency training, the teamwork, the communication that the Army has taught you, and then maybe a little bit about how that's translated into esports.
Absolutely. And yeah, just thinking on the training that the other soldier mentioned, that's definitely something we do a lot. One thing that was really kind of like beat into me as a young soldier was you need to not only know your job, but you need to know the jobs of the people above you. And the reason being is because you never know when something like that could happen. It doesn't have to necessarily be, someone's incapacitated. It could be something that, a piece of equipment malfunctions and now you can't communicate with that person. Same thing with like on the esports team. So you have to know not only what's expected of you, but what's expected of the person above you, so you can fulfill those responsibilities if necessary. And that's definitely something I think the Army does a very good job of. We have a lot of leadership schools that we send people to, but a lot of it comes down to like the individual soldier and supervisor level, where that supervisor is, you know, completely invested in his team because he wants his team to be the best team possible. So he's not going to train his team on the bare minimums. He's going to train his team on everything they need to know and everything that he knows. So that way, in the event something does happen, there's no like lapse of confidence because they know what they're supposed to be doing without hesitation. And it's the same thing like you're saying with like the esports connection, right? All these players, sure, the first time they pick up and play together, they're still kind of feeling each other out, learning what people do, what they don't do. But it's the same thing. Like as you spend more time, you train together, you learn each other, and you listen to, you know, your in-game leaders, your IGLs, your more senior people. Then you can be able to pick up as soon as something happens. You're like, okay, this is what he would want me to do, or this is what I should do. This is what we train to do. And it's just an instinct, you know, you don't really think about it. And I feel like a huge thing with leadership is just confidence. So the more you train, the more you're confident that what you're doing is the right thing, the easier it's going to be, and the more you're going to feel capable of being a leader. Because the last thing you want is to be in charge of a team or a unit and not know what you're doing, because as soon as you lose that confidence, then it just spirals from there. So
yeah, it's interesting, just because having a traditional sports background, I'm thinking about football, and you know, I was a lineman and I had to know what the strong side was doing. I was on the quick side, and even in esports, when I talk to my team, and I know a lot of the other coaches talk to their team, it's exactly what you're talking about. You got to kind of know what your teammates are doing, right? And it's almost like you stole one of my coaching sayings. You know how coaches always have sayings, right? I always just tell my kid, do your job. Right.
yeah.
You know, talking about Rocket League, which is the only game my middle schoolers are allowed to play. You know, we talk about who is on defense, who's on offense, who's in the goal. We talk about our rotations, and, you know, if you're doing your job, right, everybody does their job. You're going to probably be successful. You know, even thinking about football, it always goes back to, well, what team is going to make the least amount of mistakes? And that goes back to, is you have all 11 people on a football field doing their job. So, I mean, it's clear, you know, between the Army and esports and even traditional sports, when we talk about teamwork and leadership and communication, there's just so much crossover, you know. And are you seeing soldiers in the Army that are maybe your most talented leaders? Are they coming from I guess we'll say like a team background, whether they were part of an esports team, whether they were part of a traditional sports team? Do you think that being part of a team, again, traditional esports, are you seeing that those soldiers tend to be better leaders, tend to be better communicators and stuff like that than those that maybe didn't participate?
I will say it's definitely an easier transition for them, just because, like you said, they have the experience with like how a team functions and what, you know, their idea of a leader is.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have, you know, individuals that didn't really participate in anything like that, they kind of have to learn like what a leader is to them. And they don't already have this kind of like preconceived idea of like, hey, throughout my life, I was parts of teams. This is what, you know, a good leader is. This is what a bad leader is. If they don't have that experience, then they kind of have to, they're starting at a blank slate, and they have to go through those, you know, trials and tribulations that, you know, most people have from like a sports team or even like after school programs, stuff like that. It's not to say that they don't become good leaders, but it's more of a process, and it's definitely more, it's an easier transition if they have that background.
Yeah, that's neat. And it even always gets me thinking about, you know, one of the, I guess, qualities I always talk to my esports athletes, and you know, when I was coaching football and wrestling and stuff like that, my those athletes as well. One of those qualities that I think that we, in at least in scholastic sports, don't talk enough about is sacrifice. for a lot of my middle school esports athletes, this is their first time being part of a team. And I remember, having to, as silly as it sounds, right? Having to talk to middle schoolers, especially around this time of the year, it's getting nice out. Well, some of my kids want to go to recess instead of coming to esports practice. And then we kind of talk about that they signed up for, right? They made a commitment. And if they don't show up, well, they're letting their team down. And so, hearing it's an easier transition, and then also thinking about, just how much I can imagine that the soldiers in the Army are learning about sacrifice and being there for teammates. I can't imagine it's not a net benefit for them, as they, go out and pursue whatever they choose to, pursue after service. It's got to be, it's got to be a skill set, leadership, teamwork, communication, sacrifice that can be applied to anything. And that makes me wonder, Sergeant Boyle, you talked a little bit about your time being up as a recruiter. You're not sure what your next step is. I mean, how has being in the Army, being part of the Army Esports team, how has that kind of shaped your future plans? And, I'm not sure if you plan on going back to civilian life anytime soon, but, if and when you do, is your time, I mean, obviously your time in the Army, but even your time as a member of the Army Esports team, how has that impacted or changed or supported or made you think differently about your future, after service?
Absolutely. It's definitely been eye-opening, because for a while and still to this day, I struggle with the whole I don't know what I want to do when I grow up conundrum. So but having the experience that I've had the last few years, like dealing with the esports organization, participating in tournaments, doing like recruiting, competing in tournaments. I've started competing in a lot more tournaments because before, like, I loved the games, but I never really, convince myself to put that much time into it. But now that I'm seeing like how fun it is and how rewarding the experiences can be, I definitely plan on taking this with me for the foreseeable future. Because I mean, even if you're not competing, just being in that environment, and just it's similar to like a traditional sporting event, but I like to think of it as different, because like a traditional sporting event is something that even people who aren't like super interested in will still go and participate. Whereas the esports community, everybody is like so passionate about that specific event that I just feel like the energy in those types of environments is significantly better than like traditional sports, because it's a smaller community. Everybody knows each other. There's all that friendly, trash talking going on. But at the end, like, everybody comes together and they all recognize the skill that everybody has. And it's really just like the Army Esports. I really feel like the esports community as a whole is a community first and competitor second, because it's just a whole different atmosphere, in my opinion.
And I know you had mentioned earlier that when you are done serving, that you would like to do something in esports. What do you imagine, or what do you hope, or what do you wish that you can do?
Well, one thing I've definitely learned, since we've kind of started this whole esports thing, is that I actually like managing more than I do playing.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, I love playing, I love the competition, but being that I've been in a leadership role in the Army for so long, and I've, trained soldiers and just seen them like progress and learn and, advance in their careers, and having that and feeling that sense of reward from that, and then translating that to esports, like, hey, if I manage a team and coach a team and watch them improve, like, it's the same, kind of feeling. And it's honestly a great feeling. And I've had a few friends of mine who are like interested in Rocket League come up to me and be like, hey man, can you show me some stuff? And now I've seen them improve, and like I'll be playing against them and I'll be like, yeah, you guys have gotten a lot better. And like it's rewarding. And I think it's more rewarding to see someone improve because of the effort you put into them than it is to, win a tournament in that sense.
I like it. So the other thing, since partnering with the Army, that has been so interesting, for us to learn about and again to work in our practices has been that performance triad. And I know that's something I bug you all the time about, right? What is the effect that diet, sleep, and exercise has on performance? And you know, again, maybe it sounds silly, but my esports athletes, and I hear this echoed across Garden State Esports, you know, our esports athletes will go to health class and they probably get similar conversations. And for, I would say, many of them, it doesn't maybe, you know, resonate with them. But when they don't have a great match or they don't have a great practice, and we start to talk about, okay, well, you know, what time did you go to sleep last night? Oh, you went to bed at, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning. What'd you have for breakfast? Oh, you skipped breakfast. And you had a Monster Energy right before practice. And, you know, with my team, we kind of do some mindfulness, some goal setting, visualization, some breathing. We even do, you know, some calisthenics, you know, some physical movement before we sit down and practice and play. You know, when you frame peak performance around esports, now I have my kids' attention. You know, now I can talk to them about why they should put their screens down, you know, 2 hours before bedtime, because, you know, they now are interested in the effect that blue light has on, you know, their ability to go to sleep quickly and stuff like that. So that's been really interesting. Something I probably have enjoyed learning about the most is just all that the Army, all the research and the way that they have used that research and made it actionable. Talk to us about the performance triad as a soldier, right? What they tell you or have you do when it comes to your diet and going to sleep and exercise, and then maybe, you know, how does that factor into what a US Army esports practice might look like, or what is an expectation of a player when it comes to, right, that performance triad? I would have to imagine it's similar to that of a soldier that's not part of the US, you know, Army esports team. But, you know, I always have found this conversation really fascinating when it comes to peak performance. So talk to us a little bit about what the performance triad looks like to a soldier, and then maybe how it looks to a soldier who's part of the Army esports team. What are those expectations?
Absolutely. So the Army does make it a little easier, I will say, because the big thing too, like you said, is diet, exercise, and sleep. So one thing you're gonna do every morning in the Army is exercise. All right. Every morning we do PT. When it comes to diet, all of the dining facilities across the Army have like a green, yellow, red system where all of the healthy foods are labeled with green, all the okay foods are yellow, and the foods that you should only eat every once in a while are labeled with red. So whenever you go to the dining facilities, you know, it's right there in your face, like, hey, you should probably eat this and stay away from that, which is super beneficial, because it adds that guilt factor, you know, when you're reaching for that piece of chocolate cake and you're like, you know, do I really want to do that? So the Army definitely makes it easier. Like the whole time you're in basic training, you're not allowed to eat like the unhealthy foods because, you know, it's very strenuous. They want to make sure that you're properly, you know, nourished, that you're getting enough sleep. And one thing that I really enjoyed that the Army did within the last couple of years is they completely revamped their holistic health. So they took a huge look into sleep. Just being the organization that we are, sleep deprivation was, you know, a thing because, you know, we do nighttime operations, we do extended operations, and it was a thing and it was never really addressed. So the Army came out with this whole new regulation on holistic health, and they talk about, you know, the importance of sleep, and if you can't get a full 8 hours of sleep, the importance of intermittent naps to try to accumulate 8 hours of sleep in a 24-hour cycle. So they've definitely done a lot as far as that goes. But we do have all kinds of programs run by the medical professional in the Army that talk about, you know, like you said, the performance triad, a healthy diet, a healthy sleep cycle, and exercise regularly.
Yeah. I've gotten to talk to a lot of those scientists, and I read a lot of that holistic health stuff you were talking about, and that's what we worked into our social emotional learning curriculum in Garden State Esports. It's been really interesting to sit with my team and kind of take what the Army does with their soldiers and kind of apply it to our esports athletes. Is there anything that's different, or is there anything that is maybe I want to, I kind of want to say like hyper focused when it comes to the Army esports, because I'm thinking about like UC Irvine's esports team. I'm thinking about Harrisburg's esports teams, and I know that they, similar to the Army, they have the expectation to exercise most days, and UC Irvine even gives scholarships to students that are studying health and wellness, because they go on to work with the UC Irvine esports team to help them make sure that they have a good nutritional plan, right? They're getting that exercise in, they're getting that sleep in. So when it comes to your experience with Army esports, does the performance triad look any different? Is it any more intense because you're talking about being the 1% of the 1%, as part of the team?
I would say it's probably a little bit easier for us to manage that at the esport level, just because, as a soldier, we've gone through that process and we know what a healthy routine is. So adding that esport factor into it, everybody in the Army esports team is an adult, they're grown men and women. They've gone through all this training. They understand the importance of good sleep. They understand the importance of a healthy diet, and they understand the importance of exercise. And in an esports, specific area, it's all like mental, cognitive reaction time, fine motor skills. It's all the little things that, you have to eat right. You have to sleep well. And what we see a lot too, like in like the professional scene or like the pro amateur scene with esports, is that people aren't taking that as seriously as they should, and so they're resorting to other substances to help fill the gap. But the easiest and most efficient way to do it on the esports level is to just make sure you get sleep. The game's still going to be there tomorrow. You don't have to play that next game. Make sure you're eating right, take breaks, eat a full meal, don't just be snacking on stuff so you can keep playing, and then exercise. It doesn't have to be like a full-blown hour-long gym session. Just go outside and go for a walk. Just do something physical. Even no matter how little it is, it's better than not doing anything at all. So for us on the esports level, we still have work every day, so we still work out every day, we still eat healthy. The biggest thing for the esports team is just sleep management, because we do this in our free time, so we do have to make sure we're giving everybody ample time to sleep.
Love it. So as we hit the half hour, so Mark here, I'd love to open it up for some questions. I know we've got a few folks hanging out with us today. If you guys want to unmute and ask Sergeant Boyle any questions, that'd be fantastic. If you want to throw it in the chat. Before we wrap up, I'd love to just give anybody who's interested the opportunity to ask any questions. While you're thinking, the one question that I had thought of, going back to thinking about my dad and going into the Army, being in communications, and then eventually turning that into a career. We know that there is an esports and STEM connection, right? We know that kids who participate in esports are more likely to end up in career pathways, in STEM. Sergeant Boyle, if you kind of had to talk to a student who was considering the Army about how serving in the Army could eventually help them with a career afterwards, what could you kind of tell them? Talk them through maybe to a kid who's interested in STEM, right? Joining the Army, being able to explore and follow your passion for esports. What kind of training, what kind of occupations or MOSs are there in and around STEM, and maybe a little bit about how that could possibly translate into a career after service.
Yeah, of course. So the Army does have over 150 different jobs, and so many of those are in the STEM field. So the easiest way would be just talk about how the Army does a lot of accrediting programs. They do a lot of certifications that can directly translate into the civilian field. So you don't have to pay to go to like trade schools. And like we were talking about earlier before, the stream, you can get that firsthand experience in the STEM field that a lot of these, companies and corporations are looking for, because they want to have the experience, the, recommendation letters. They want to know firsthand that you know what you're doing. The Army can provide that experience. And what's really great about the Army is that, unlike, traditional schools and, trade schools, is that you get paid the entire time that you're learning these skills. And while you're getting paid to learn these skills, you're also earning, your GI Bill. So if you do decide like, hey, I want to do even further education into this, the Army's going to pay for it again on the backside. And for a more like esports specific career field, like I was saying earlier, the Army Esports program is super easy. They're very friendly. You just go ahead, hop in there, get involved, try your foot out with, running tournaments, moderating tournaments, recruiting players, explore all the different various fields of esports. Or maybe if you're interested in more like the LAN setup and like all the wiring, communications, networking, stuff like that. We have networking jobs in the Army. We have communication jobs in the Army that can all directly correlate to a career in esports as well, or a career in any of the various STEM fields.
In your experience, do you find that a lot of soldiers who are in that Army esports community, do they go on and have careers in the esports ecosystem in civilian life?
Just being how new the esports system is, I can't say like with like numbers and whatnot, like how many
Right.
have gone in. But I do know that there are some of the team members have competed in some pretty high level tournaments and have definitely, shown face. And even if it's not like, oh, wow, the Army has a really good team, it's like, wow, this particular player on the Army team is really good.
Yeah.
And there's also the huge networking that comes in with like the managers. So like the Rocket League team, when we first started, I was basically contacting all the colleges, other organizations, doing all the networking, trying to be like, hey, we have a team. Would you guys be interested in doing scrimmages? Would you guys be interested in doing like small tournaments, and stuff like that. So there's definitely a lot of people that have gone further into the esports career because of it. And it's definitely something I see that can be very beneficial for people trying to transition into that field.
And actually, that last part about scrimmaging colleges and reaching out, making those connections, Regina asked a question in the chat. She says, do you know if the high school ROTC programs, are they looking to integrate esports into their mission?
I personally do not know. I know it's something we've talked about in the past, as a way of incorporating, like a JROTC-esque tournament, like a battle of the branches, if you will. But the biggest thing we have is just, if the JROTC students are interested, we encourage them to join our community. I know that JROTC is a different headquarters than us, a different command, but I would definitely love to see the JROTC, get involved, because I'm sure they have students that are gamers too.
Yeah, maybe we could set something up where Garden State Esports hosts some type of JROTC kind of tournament. That'd be pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Love it, love it, love it. So seeing no other questions, first, Sergeant Boyle, is there anything that you want to share that I didn't ask you? Anything that you want the kids who are going to watch this, or the coaches who are going to watch this at GSE, anything I didn't ask you, anything you wanted to share about the Army and esports and your role and possibly their role?
Absolutely. I think my cat Hazel wants to say hello first, so that's my cat. But the biggest thing is just on like a personal level. I know the Army can be intimidating on the outside. There's a lot of misconceptions about what we do. A lot of people feel that the military is like a plan B. Like, this is what I do when everything I want to do fails. And a lot of people don't take the time to like actually educate themselves on what we do, what the benefits are. Typically when they think of the Army, they just think war. And they don't understand that we do a lot of humanitarian aid. Like during, the Ebola outbreak in Africa, we were sending medical teams over there to assist with that. Even right now here in our home country with COVID, we're sending medical teams all across the country to help, administer vaccines. There's a lot of stuff the Army does, apart from, just war. So educate yourselves on what we do, educate yourselves on the benefits, how we can set you up for success, break away from like the societal norm of being like, oh, the Army's the last chance. Give us a chance, and I guarantee you'll be impressed with what we have to offer, and it'll help you in the long run. It really will.
Wonderful. Let me share my screen again real quick. And once again, thank SHI and Intel for sponsoring tonight's webinar. And then I will post again Sergeant Boyle's information, his email, his cell phone, coaches, if you want to get in touch with them. Sergeant Boyle, you said you were willing to talk to specifically schools and teams that are interested, want to go more in detail. I know we've even talked about doing some coaching, right, with you and some of the coaches, the players on the Army Esports team, doing some coaching as well. So we're working that out. But to those watching, Sergeant Boyle, for as long as he's around, is going to be the military liaison for Garden State Esports. So if you have students or you are a community organization that has kids that are interested, feel free to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to Sergeant Boyle, and we will let him kind of explain all the benefits that come along with being in the Army. So Sergeant Boyle, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
It has been wonderful to work with you and the rest of the folks over, with the Performance Triad, with the resiliency training, with the leadership training, learning about, the different occupations and the different career pathways, in and through and after the military. It's been really beneficial. And I think it's something important that all of our students and all of our kids know about, all of the different options they have post-secondary school. And so thank you again. And I'm excited to continue to work with you and do some cool stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Chris. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you.